All right, hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're joined by a brand new guest. Her name is Esther Goetz. She is an author, a podcaster, a friend, and an all-around amazing human being. So Esther, welcome to the show. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I love your podcast. It was one of the first podcasts I listened to when my faith started to shift.
Oh, wow.
And I remember listening to Jonathan Puddle and you guys talk in my car about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, wow, I got to listen to more of this. So thank you. I'm so
Yeah.
excited to be a guest.
Thank you. Jonathan Puddle told me the last time he was on the show, he got in trouble with his church.
Yes,
So there was a little bit of an inquisition.
poor guy. Yes, I love Jonathan.
He's the best. He's the best. Well, I'm really excited that you're here. But first things first, maybe since this is your first time here, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself? You're an author. You co-host a podcast that I was blessed to be a guest on last year. You have a blog. So give us a snapshot of Esther. Who are you? What do you do? Tell us what we need to know.
Yeah, so I am an author. I write in the space of Esther the Dalai Mama, but I that's kind of like more of a hobby
Hmm.
for me. My day job is actually an author in parenting big space, people with teens and young adults. I'm a speaker there. I write there. I have books there. And but that's kind of going to come to an end as my kids are now kind of very grown and flown. And I've moved into becoming a spiritual director. So that is where my heart lies right now.
Hmm.
I'm being trained. I'm almost done, almost graduating, just another couple weeks here. And I just get very excited about the idea of having people um, learn about their true
Hmm.
self and
Hmm.
live from that place. And that's
Hmm.
kind of where my spiritual direction will be hopefully taking people. So yes.
That's awesome. How long is the training? How long has the training been for that? Like, is
It's
it a
been
very
two
long
years.
2 okay, 2 years?
2 years. It's
Yep.
been 2 years. And it has changed my life and actually all of my skill sets, which is so beautiful. I'm so
Hmm.
grateful. All of my skill sets, my passions seem to be coming together in this space of spiritual direction.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'd love to hear more about your, I don't know, your spiritual journey, if you will, because I think that's the biggest reason I really wanted to talk to you is because
Mm.
I've heard bits and pieces of your story on your podcast. I've read some things over here and over there, but I don't think I've ever heard the whole thing in one shot. So maybe we could begin by, hearing a little bit about your faith journey, what brought you into the world of deconstruction, what that's looked like for you, what you've learned. Where are you at with all the God things these days? So talk to us and we'll see where we land from there.
Okay, yes, I am a missionary kid.
Mm.
I am actually the grandchild of missionaries. So,
It's in your blood.
evangelical, yes, born. I mean, it is in my blood, in my DNA. The idea was that we are put here to keep people out of hell. That was the only mission that I grew up in.
Mhm.
Um, it was my parents' life's work, my grandparents' life's work, and then it became my life's work. I
Mm.
took that on myself. I was told when I was very young, maybe 11, 12, that I had the gift of evangelism.
Mm.
So I took that to heart. I was a crazy person in high school. I am embarrassed and would like to say sorry for everybody who ever would listen to this that I went to high school with. I did get quote unquote so many people saved,
Mm.
40, 50 people. We had a huge group of us. It was insane. And then I took that also into the workplace when I graduated from college.
Mm.
I ended up having a Bible study, getting a bunch of people saved there, quote unquote, keeping
Yep.
them out of hell, scaring them to hell. This is a quote we would say all the time is I want to scare the hell out of you.
Yep. Yep.
And that was like so I don't know, cool because we were saying the word hell even though
Right.
we weren't allowed to
Look
say
at
the word
me.
hell,
So
but we could
bad.
use it in that format.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my mission. And
Did you do like the Roman road and all that kind of stuff
the
with
Roman
people and
was
evangelism
huge.
explosion? Yeah.
Yes, evangelism explosion, the four spiritual laws, chick tracks, whatever you could
Chick
possibly do.
tracks.
But
Yeah.
for me, I was a walking chick track. That's what I would say. Every
Mm.
word out of my mouth, every thought I had all day, I brought it into my early parenting. I remember saying to my husband, well, if we bring these kids into the world and they are not praisers of God, I don't want to have children. It was
Wow.
just
Yeah.
permeated. My 8-year-old held my 4-year-old down in the back seat of the car and begged him to receive Christ as his savior because she was so afraid he was going to hell.
Wow.
And so that is such a sad thing for me to say. I wasn't a bad person. I was a nice person. I
Sure.
was
Sure.
fairly kind.
Yeah.
But I had an agenda. The underlying agenda was highly concerning for me as I look back. I couldn't just love people with no strings attached.
Mm.
I couldn't even love my own children with no strings attached. There was the constant underlying agenda to make sure they spent forever with God in heaven, and a God, now that I look back on it, is an absolute narcissist
Right.
who
It's
I
a
don't
monster.
really want. I would not want to spend eternity with, who is sending people to eternal conscious torment. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just a horrible, horrible God. Yet I was just stuck.
Wow.
I was stuck. I was stuck in fear, guilt, shame, all of that stuff. And it came out
Mm.
in those ways of trying to control everything. When you have fear, you want to control.
Yeah.
And so that's the best way I thought I could control. If I could use fear as a tactic to get other people into heaven, why not? And
Yeah.
the quote, life is very short. This is a blip.
Hmm.
In the eternal landscape, who cares what happens here? It all matters what happens there and
Yeah.
next.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And I would say, like, the greatest thing that happened to me was children, and especially, and Glenn, you're not there yet, teenagers,
Mm.
where they began to push back. I had a couple of them, and I love them for this now, that didn't do the formula thing, that sort of changed the way I tried to control them. They would
Mm.
not be controlled in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
And they started just pushing back on my theology, just coming at me, very smart kids, questioning everything. And the big shift for me, and I do not know what it was, but I did love my kids. I had never experienced um, the level of love that ever until I had unconditional love until I had those kids. And I remember saying to my 13-year-old, what if you're right?
Mm.
And it was like I'm tearing up. It was like a switch flipped. Is that
Wow.
right? A switch flipped.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then it all began to thankfully slowly unravel. And the first things I attacked were like fear and guilt from the pulpit. My kids would be like looking at me, looking over at me every time
Like,
the
really,
pastor
mom?
would say something.
Right.
And then we started to have conversations in the car, and
Yeah.
they turned from a posture of certainty to curiosity. And believe it or not, that's when my relationship with my kids also changed from a place where I was authoritarian to,
Mm.
power over and then power with and empowering them.
Yeah.
So it really was radical. And my faith journey was just sort of along for the ride. I mean, it was
Mm.
informing me every which way, but I began to allow other things in my life to inform me other than the Bible, other
Right.
people, pastors, what I
Yeah.
was told all my life. So yeah,
Yeah.
so I would describe I mean, it has been a long, lovely, slippery slope or the
Sure.
water slide that leads to life, as I like
Right.
to say.
Depending on who you talk to.
Yes. And where I describe my faith now, to answer your question, is
Mhm.
with 3 words: open,
Mhm.
mystery, and freedom. But I will add a fourth word, which is confusing at times.
Hmm. Why is it confusing?
Because of the word mystery.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's just sometimes I'm not quite sure exactly where I land, even going on podcasts like, what do you think now? I'm like, well, I'm I'm confused at
Right.
times. Not all
Yeah.
the time. I'm not confused in the most essential places of love,
Sure.
your neighbor as yourself. Love wins in the end. To be very hippie like, love is the answer. But I am confused onto, like, what do I actually believe about certain issues or certain ideas?
That's right.
The
Yeah,
afterlife.
and I feel like that's kind of where I'm at too. And it's funny because I'm sure you would agree with this. Like back in the day when I was a fundamentalist evangelical, very similar to yourself, not having an answer was like the worst thing
Yeah.
possible, right? Because you always have to have an answer for the questions that are asked of you, as it says in Peter, or whatever, book that is. But, that was something I prided myself on, was having the answers. But now I'm in this place where I'm embracing the mystery, and that feels oddly much more comforting
Hmm.
than the certainty that I feel like I used to have.
Hmm.
And I feel like there's something very comforting in resting in the I don't know, but
Hmm.
trusting that it is, if that makes any sense. And I feel like that's what I love about this podcast, is like inviting people on of all these different stories, all
Hmm.
these different backgrounds, all these different beliefs, and saying, well, what do you think of this? And hearing what they say and say, man, like, what if they're right? What if that really is the way? And I feel like it's just that it allows this thing we call belief to evolve and to grow
Mm.
and to become something of its own. And I think that's just a beautiful thing. So I love it.
Yeah, I never understood the word mystical. I never know what a
Yeah,
mystic was
right.
until I've become one.
Right.
I never knew mystic was like mystery.
Yep, exactly.
And I heard a really powerful thing in my spiritual direction training that when you turn to mystery, become a mystic or move into that more mystical place, you're kind of inside the river. You're in the depths of the river,
Yep,
and faith traditions are kind of the boats that flow on top of the river.
yep,
And we have more in common with other mystics than
yep,
we actually have in common with our faith tradition that's floating at the top, because there's bigger themes that run through life as
yeah,
a mystic, things like light and darkness, hope and despair, bigger issues that
yep,
run through that are similar, that are
yep,
very similar, which
yep.
is what I love about your podcast. That
Mm,
what if question is huge,
mm,
because that's the mystic. What if?
yep, that's right. Isn't it funny too how like having children can bring all this stuff out in you? Because when I was on your podcast, I talked about my, experience with my daughter, but just to say it again because it fits here, when she was born, she went to the NICU, and we're running down the
Mm,
hallway and like I'm chasing the doctors. I have no idea what's going on. It's like complete mayhem, they moving faster than I can even
mm,
comprehend, and they put her in this tank and hook up these wires, and they're all right, you can put your hands in the tank. I'm like, all right. So I put my hands in the tank, and she like grabbed my finger, and I was like,
mm,
everything just exploded for me. Here I am,
mm,
like, steeped in Christian education in the NICU, thinking about original sin, and like that's just what immediately hit me. And I'm like, man, how in the world can this little baby be sinful? It doesn't make any sense. Like, theologically, it made sense to me because I read it in the books. I knew all the verses, all the different things. I'm like, it does, in reality, it doesn't make any sense anymore. I'm like, there's nothing this little baby could ever do,
mm,
grow up to be, or do to me, or whatever, that it would ever change the way that I think of her and I
mm,
love her. But yet she's born, and God sees her as sinful and evil and all these different things. That does not make any sense to me. And I remember I went home after my wife had done some recovery and stuff like that. I brought up the story, and I was like, I don't know if I buy into this stuff anymore. I think we got to really
mm,
rethink it. She's like, yeah, I don't think so either. And that kind of sent us down this path. But it's just so funny how having a child can really change your perspective. I
mhm.
think if you embrace it and you allow it to change your perspective.
Yeah. I wonder if the deeper issue there too is love over fear,
Mm,
right? Like
yeah.
being led by love instead of being pushed by fear. And there is something about the risk you take when you have a child that you will love forever. And
Yep.
love can either move us to vulnerability, or it can lead us, or fear leads us to trying to control.
That's
So
right. That's right.
it's so powerful. That it is powerful. I love that story of yours. Oh, I love that.
Thank you. So one of the things I've heard you talk about is becoming your own authority and
Mhm,
learning, you mentioned it before, to trust the inner voice that we all have. So I'm wondering if you could talk to us more about what it's looked like for you to learn to trust that voice, and what it means for you to be your own authority, even like on a regular basis. Because for those of us raised in the environment that we were in in a fundamentalist kind of place, the inner voice is never to be trusted. It's never to be
No.
listened to. It is dangerous. The heart is deceitful above all things, Jeremiah says. It'll lead us astray, all these different things. So maybe talk to us about what it what it looked like for you to kind of embrace that idea, what it means, and what it looks like for you on a regular basis.
Yeah, I would say for me, the entire practice of spiritual direction is this very thing, moving people from a place of external authority to internal authority,
Mm,
which is probably why it gets quite a bit of pushback in especially the high control religious spaces.
hmm
And that's exactly what I want to do. It's kind of my life's mission to help people move from external authority to internal authority. But let me just define quickly
hmm
what it is.
Sure.
Um, External authority is when you put your trust in places like any institution that's out there, anything external to you, religious, educational, governmental, parents, spouses, social media,
Yeah.
community expectations, everything, all the voices out there.
Yeah.
Doesn't make them
Huh.
bad. It's
Yeah.
just that they're external.
Yeah.
For me personally, believe it or not, the external authority was God.
Mm,
Uh, God, what would God think about this decision or that decision? Was I making God happy? God was the driving force. I couldn't do anything. And this specific thing was passed down to me. Make sure you have a Bible verse, which is the voice of God, before you make any major decision.
yeah.
Brought that into my parenting, my marriage, everything. Make sure you have an external thing telling you before you make any. Now, little decisions, that would be ridiculous. Brushing your teeth, all those things.
Sure. Right.
Of course, that wasn't how it was, which I
Right.
know that you can go, some people do go to that level.
hmm
But for me, it was anything that's going to change your life. Make sure you have this external thing telling you it's okay.
Yeah.
Internal authority is, like you said, the ability to trust yourself to make decisions aligned with your own personal values and beliefs.
hmm
And here it is, even when they differ from external standards,
hmm
even if they differ from your parents, your religion, your educational community, the government, social media, community expectations, God, quote
Yeah.
unquote. I use
Yeah.
God in quotes there. Um, an example to me is we're having an election in the United States. And the only thing that I did, well, one of the things that I did, not the only thing that I did, but one of the biggest first things that I did was I looked back at the personal values assessment test that I had taken
hmm
about a year ago that I continue to look over. What are my personal values? And then how does whoever, the person on the board of ed, all the way up to the president, align with my values?
Yeah.
So it's not an ad on TV. It's not because my husband is voting a certain way. It's coming from inside of me. It's generated from inside of me. It's not pressure that I'm in a state that's, you know, going to make or break this election. It
Yeah.
generates from inside of me. So that's
mm
something practical of the way, say, I would even help somebody that would come to me in spiritual direction, like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm so stressed out about
Yeah.
XYZ coming up in my life, the election, my marriage, this partner, having kids, all those things. What are your own personal values?
mm Yeah. And I mean, it's a hard thing because I feel like, again, growing up, like you're never to trust that voice. And you're really trained, especially when you go in the education world in terms of Bible college and seminary, like you're
Hmm.
trained first and foremost to look to that external voice. But then you're also trained to become that external voice for other people, where you
Yes.
become the one who has the answers, you become the one who has the direction. And I can remember, and I've told this story too, but I get when I first got to seminary, I mean, just out of college, and I had long hair. I was driving a bright yellow car, and I had cut off shirt on, cut off pants, and I got Green Day music blasting from my speakers. I pull in the parking lot, I go inside, and I'm like, and they're like, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here for class." And they're like, what? It looked at me like I had like eight heads. They're like, oh, you got to go downstairs to the chapel. So I'm like, all right. So I go down to the chapel. I walk in. People in there have suits on. They have ties on. They're all neat and they're put together. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? And so I go and I sit off on the side and I'm just sitting there, and one of my professors from college came over and he was always very supportive of me. And he said, don't let this place change you because it
Mm,
will. And
mm,
I was like, oh yeah, okay, definitely. But it did over time,
mm,
because I cut my hair,
mhm,
I got neater clothes, more presentable clothes, so to speak. I
mhm,
covered up my tattoos. I took
mm,
out my piercings, and I went to pastor a church, and I had to cover up my tattoos in the pulpit, and I had to keep my hair really
mm,
trim, and I do all these different things, and I just became somebody else. I put my Green Day music away. I just listened to
mm,
worship music, and I just became this other person because these voices that were coming at me were telling
mm,
me what to do.
mm,
And I declared this year, this
mm,
2024 in January, I said, you know what? I want to get back in touch with that younger version of
mhm,
myself that
mhm,
I locked away all of those
mhm,
years ago and really try to figure out what is that inner voice inside that
mhm,
I've silenced. And I feel
mm,
like a year in now, I'm finally starting to hear the
mm,
whispers inside.
mm.
And I'm like, man, you're not as evil and bad as I was told that you are,
Yes.
And just kind of letting that voice come out. And it's just been such a great experience for me. But it's
Mm,
difficult because there's still that Christian soldier inside that
mhm.
says, you gotta go look in your Bible, or you gotta go talk to this person, or you gotta go talk to that person because they know better than you
Yeah,
do. And it's a hard process, but it's so freeing. That's my point.
right.
Yeah.
One of the things I think I've had to be careful too is the question I keep in my mind too is how do I not become what I've left?
Mm,
And I think the danger of that black and white thinking where it's not no external influence, right?
yep, yep, yep,
That it's not all or nothing thinking. It's not like no one has the right to speak into my life. That
yep.
would also be completely foolish,
That's right.
right?
That's right.
So I don't want to swing all the way and be like, F this person, screw that
Right.
system. I don't have anything to learn. And I think one um, piece of that too is that there is value in voices that are different from us.
That's right.
We wouldn't be where we are without those voices either
Yep.
that kind of allowed for gentle guidance along the way. Like I said at the beginning, not power over, but empowering us to move
That's right.
towards our own hearts. That's very, very different than power over. This is what I think, and this is what you should do, is very different than a gentle friend that comes alongside and says, hey, let's make your heart come alive, which I've seen. I always get kind of teary when I think about my kids.
Mm,
Again, empowering them to be their self. That's what
yeah.
I talk about in that Moms of Big Space that I
That's
write
right.
in, empowering them to
Yep.
listen to their own voice. Doesn't mean they don't come to me for guidance and it also doesn't mean that they don't influence me. They have had the biggest influence on me, probably of anybody anywhere.
Yeah.
So it's not all or nothing thinking again,
Yep.
but I think our voices were so shut down,
Yep.
canceled, um, eliminated, really.
Yep.
And so how I just get as the spiritual director, I'm cheering you on, Glenn. I'm thinking, oh, yay, what a great decision for
Yeah.
2024.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that.
Thank you. And I think too, I think it's about listening to your inner voice in regards to what other voices
Hmm.
should be invited in, right? Because like in the
Yes.
past, it was, well, this person is a professor, this person's a pastor, this person's an author. They clearly know better than I do.
Hmm.
They deserve to come in regardless of how they might make me feel on the
Hmm.
inside. And so again,
Hmm.
it's squashing down that intuition and pushing it away.
Hmm.
Whereas now I feel like I can welcome people in, but I can listen to that intuition and say, yeah, I don't really know about that really the best for me. It's interesting to listen to their perspective and hear what they
Hmm.
say, but I think I'm just going to kind of leave it there and that's it. Whereas this other person, that's really interesting. I think that sits really well with my spirit. I'm going to follow that kind of direction. And I think it's just interesting to have that inner voice that was once shut down with the intuition, now welcoming it in and being able to let it help you decide what voices you're going to let in, what voices you're going to keep kind of at a distance.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think one of the things there too is the idea of what awakens stuff in us. I don't and it's triggers too, right? What
Hmm.
awakens, what connects with us, what's waking us to ourselves and our
Yeah.
passions and what makes
Yep.
our hearts come alive. Also, what is uncomfortable for us too, and
Yep.
not shutting that side down and being like, oh, well, maybe this is pushing me in an uncomfortable way to
Yep.
move toward myself.
Yeah.
Because moving toward ourselves is not the most comfortable
It's true.
comfortable thing at times.
It's
So
true.
it's kind of navigating through all of that. It's not
Yeah.
just, oh, what makes me so happy. It's also, oh, what makes me uncomfortable. It's engaging with what makes me angry, engaging
Yep.
with all of our emotions. And we call those in our spiritual direction practices portals to the soul.
Mm,
All the different
yeah.
portals to the soul, which I think is are really powerful. What is getting at Glenn's soul?
That's right.
What is awakening his soul?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah.
Take us more into that because that was my next question was portals to the soul because you,
Oh
you
yeah.
mentioned that in our email exchange and call me intrigued because I've never heard of it until I heard it from you. And so I'd love to hear more about what portals to the soul means. What does it entail? Why is it important for
Mm.
everyday people to know about? Talk to us about that. Take us into that a little bit more.
Well, it's funny that you're saying it. I had never even heard this idea. I actually kind of quote unquote made it up myself after I had gone through my training and was about, I don't know, 18 months in. I
Hmm.
said to somebody, wow, what they're doing in our training is they're opening up all these like portals and doorways to our soul. And somebody was like, oh, that's incredible. And
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, they're inviting us to all these different practices, rituals, whatever you want to call them, that are invitational to get us to connect with what's
Right.
going on inside of us, to
Yeah.
the place that I say the soul is the space that will live forever,
Yeah.
that is the real us, the thing that's unique to us.
Hmm.
It's unexplainable yet reachable at the same time.
Yeah.
Just strange, but we do shut that side of ourself down. People have tried to do it through therapy and um, all kinds of means, like how do I connect? But I say portals to the soul is anything that connects you to your soul,
Hmm.
awakens you to what's going on inside of you that would connect you to you.
Hmm.
Some examples are poetry. That's been a new thing for me. How does because you can't argue with a poem, which was arguing with a poem.
Right.
And so just even making little switches of like reading a poem, perhaps,
Hmm.
and what does it awaken inside of me? I don't love the word trigger because it's a negative connotation. I like the word awaken
Mm.
because awaken means that it's something that was asleep
Yep.
that needs to be tended to,
Yep.
that needs to be paid attention to. Um, the Enneagram is another really fun one that people
Mm.
use. This is a hard one, our own wounds and traumas,
Yep.
and triggers, awakenings, those things also are portals to the soul. That tarot, I know you've had some people come on
Yep.
and talk about tarot.
Yep.
For that, I would say that's a broader thing of image. It's image, not just tarot. Tarot is one form of how image is a
Yep.
portal to the soul.
Yep.
And images like the pictures on your phone. What have you taken pictures of in the last 6 weeks?
Mm.
Look at that. Listen to your own life.
Yep.
Look at your phone and say, what is that? That obviously, I stopped and took a picture of that. It's awakening to me into who I am.
Yeah.
That
Huh.
drew me in. So we have all kinds of images, and tarot, I know, is one that I was told was evil, wicked, terrible.
Same. Same.
And it's just images that maybe are calling something to life inside of
Yeah.
you, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Um, Soul collages are a really interesting thing where you just get a bunch of images
Mm.
and you don't have an agenda and you just pick them and you put them on a piece of paper. It's different than a vision board, which has an agenda. A soul collage is just getting in touch with your soul. Get a bunch of, we don't have them as much anymore, magazines, news, whatever, words, all the stuff that comes in the mail that you just throw right into recycling,
Yep.
And perhaps, like I said, pictures on your phone that maybe you would want to print.
Mm,
Dreams is a really, really, really powerful one that
mm,
I do quite a bit of work with. We spend a lot of time in our unconscious in our dream. So
yeah.
that's another portal to the soul, working through dreams. Simple things like reflection questions
Mm,
can be, and then nature has been my 2024.
mm,
I went on a journey to quote unquote rewild my soul in
mm,
2024. I didn't know what to do on that front, but nature has been something that just makes me feel at peace and makes me feel scared. I'm afraid of heights, all of those things.
mm,
Just calls me into a space. And I began to follow somebody named Mary DeYoung, and she is an eco theologian.
mm,
And she has this whole idea of rewilding your soul. My daughter had done 1,000 hours outside in 2023,
mm.
and I decided to try that for 2024. And believe it or not, as of this taping, I'm at 1,002.
Wow.
So I've done it a couple months ahead of time, but it really connected me into ideas of what's going on, not externally, but internally. What's going on in my internal landscape? The one that was tamed,
Mm,
the one that wasn't allowed to be wild. And so that has been for 2024 for me the largest portal to my soul, the
wow.
most influential portal to my soul.
Mm,
I was so afraid of the dark when I was little. This year I slept outside on my patio in the dark,
wow.
um, about 5 or 6 nights, and felt the universe holding me in a safe space.
Mm,
And I don't know. I feel very comfortable now with that. So it's more
yeah.
that inner landscape.
Interesting.
What has been killed? What predators do I need to reintroduce, like anger,
Yeah.
into my life, like the wolf, that was reintroduced and actually takes the ecosystem and makes it better. So that
Mm,
all of these things can be portals to your soul. And the one that is a little surprising to me is scripture,
mm,
as a portal to my soul. What is it awakening inside of me now that I'm holding it in such a way
yeah.
that it's
Wow.
not an authority over me, but it's could be maybe something that connects me to my soul.
Yeah. I love that. Wow. Yeah, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking now about my year and
Mm.
what the soul portals have been for me. And I think the biggest one is art has
Oh
been
yeah.
the biggest one for me because, you know, I when I was a kid, like I went nowhere without a sketch pad and
Mm,
markers and crayons. We had a doctor's appointment and I was going to be in the waiting room. I'd be drawing. If I was on a break at school and lunch, I'd be drawing, and I was always drawing something, and I loved it. And I wanted to be a cartoonist, and I wanted to work for Disney. I wanted to work for, Hanna-Barbera. I wanted to work
mm,
for, I want to do drawing for somebody and some kind of animation. And then in art class in junior high, we did a segment on pop art, all the colors and the bright and all this stuff. Like, oh, this is awesome. And I wanted to merge that with cartoons and do all this different kind of stuff. I had these crazy ideas. And my art teacher told us about like art school. You can go to art school and you can learn about art. I'm like,
mm,
oh, it's amazing, right? And so I remember sharing this with somebody in my life who was an artist, and I was so excited. And he said to me, yeah, your art just isn't really up to par, to
mm,
be able to do that kind of stuff. You really have to have more realistic dreams as you grow so you can make a living for yourself and all these things. I'm like, oh man, I guess so. So I put all my art stuff away. I never opened it. I went
mm,
from maybe ninth grade, 10th grade until I was 40 years old. I never did
mm,
anything with art. And
mm,
so again, this year becoming the year to get in touch with that inner voice.
mm.
My daughter and my wife got me some art supplies for Christmas. My mom got me some stuff for Christmas. And the first like time I took it out, I was so triggered to use that word. I was like, I can't do this. I can put it away. I was like,
Mm,
I was all that critical voice inside that, that picture sucks. You can't do this, blah, blah, blah. So I put it all away and I started slowly taking it out. And
mm,
then all of a sudden I was like, I actually now I remember why I like this so much. I like all the
mm,
colors, like all the things. And so I just been doing everything has just been pouring out of me. And I feel like it's really
Mm,
helped me get back in touch
hmm
with that part of myself, that intuitive part of myself that I
hmm
locked away in so many ways. So I think the art for me has been a huge portal.
Yeah, that's what's so beautiful about the portals is everyone's are so different.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of what might be a portal to your soul. And when you said you were triggered, I think about that. Like triggers is what, causes us to maybe shut it down.
Yes. Right.
Where I like the idea of what causes us to bring it out,
Yeah. Yeah.
and pay attention to it. And in our at our intensives, we have just something called the creative space.
Mm.
And there's a woman there that just comes and brings every kind of art supply, everything you could imagine. And then she
Yeah.
says, go outside and get more art, and
Yeah.
do whatever it takes. And just every day we have a Sabbath time and people just go into that creative space. And that's a huge one.
Yeah.
A huge portal is our own internal creativity.
Yeah.
And everyone is a creator of something.
That's right.
Everything has that. Everyone has that. And it's not, nobody's allowed to, have a hold on the market of creativity.
That's right. Even though some try to.
Yes, yes.
Right?
So, I love that for you. This is another way I'm like, oh, good. Yay.
Yeah.
I feel
Thank
like you're
you.
my kid. And I'm like,
Cheering me on. Thank you. Thank you. So what about, I mean, you mentioned before about the Bible, which I also think is interesting because I've had a similar experience where I was raised with the Bible in a particular way as you were, and you understood it a certain way as I did. And then for a long time, I put it away for a while because I was like, I
hmm
can't read this
hmm
this book without all the baggage that comes along with it. So like, I can't do it. So I put it
hmm
away. And I had this feeling like I should take it out again because you're supposed to read your Bible every day, you know? So I was like, I should really take it off the shelf, but no, I'm not gonna take it off the shelf until I want to take it off the shelf,
hmm
until I feel like drawn to it for whatever reason it might be. So it was maybe 5, 6, 7, I don't even know how long it was. It was a long time. And finally I took it back off the shelf and I started to see it very differently
hmm
than I used to see it. And it felt like less of a guidebook for me, less of a rule book, and more of like this is a collection of these writings that people have
hmm
put down of them trying to figure out what it looks like to walk through this very visible, real, painfully joyful life with a very invisible God who's supposedly there but can't really see that being. And so I started to see it through that kind of a lens and then kind of take my place in that and see like, oh yeah, I can see why Paul said this and felt
hmm
this way. I can see why Jeremiah
hmm
wrote this thing about, the heart is deceitful above all things. I started to see it very differently. So I'm curious, like how, since you say that the scriptures are one of your portals to your soul, like how do the scriptures make their way into the daily life of Esther? Or the daily,
Well,
give us like a week in the life of Esther. Like when does that book come off the shelf, or does it come off the shelf, or what does that look like for you?
I have such a similar journey to you with needing to put it away for some time because I needed to work through some traumas related
Mm-hmm.
to it and
Mm.
some wounds, and having it been weaponized for so long, and then also my own forgiveness of myself
Yeah.
of using it as a weapon uh, against others.
Mm-hmm.
So I really needed to spend my time working through my own traumas related
Mm.
to the Bible. And so everybody's on a different journey related to that.
Mm-hmm.
When I began to write and journal and put out books, the greatest thing that happened to me inside was viewing the Bible as 66, however many, not 66 authors, but 66 different perspectives or 40 authors, or
Yeah.
I'm sure we don't even know how many authors are in that collection of writings.
Yeah.
And as I looked at my own writings, thinking, I don't even agree with myself from 5 years ago, what I wrote.
Right.
And then I heard words like, in their earlier writings, they said this. And then in their
Yeah,
later writings,
yeah,
they said this. And people even approaching authors that way. English, professors being like, well, this is where they changed. Watching someone like Glennon Doyle talk about her earlier writings and how much she's changed, it's been more comfortable to me to view the people like that. So I don't say things like God said or the Bible. I say, wow, did David have OCD when he wrote down, um, memorize this scripture, then I won't sin?
Right, right.
Uh, Perhaps he was really struggling there with trying to be like, how do I stop sinning? How do I
Hmm.
stop sinning? This is what I'll do. I'll memorize the Torah. I'll hide, quote unquote, God's word in my heart. That's
Yeah,
going to fix it.
yeah,
And so then I can see them as just human beings who are trying, like you said, similar to what you're saying, trying to figure out their very own holy human journey and the intertwining of that with the God they are that they know of within their own framework,
yeah.
and how that kind of gets messed up because David seems very all over the place
Hmm.
when he writes.
Yeah,
And that makes me kind of happy because I'm
yeah.
all over the place when I write.
Right.
And I'm embarrassed at what I wrote, even in my earlier deconstructing days. Not embarrassed, but that was who, I mean, yes, embarrassed in some ways. I wouldn't say that now, but also holding that person in a more tender space, my
That's
former
right.
self.
Yeah.
And then I think about my 80-year-old self going, oh my gosh, I cannot believe you wrote that when you were like 50.
Right. What
Oh
were you thinking?
no.
Right.
So just allowing that movement, it's a very specific time and space that it's being
Hmm.
written in with very specific people who had all of their cultural baggage, all of their own traumas,
Yeah.
all of the stuff that was being told to them, all of their external authorities. And then I can say, oh, Paul, that's why Paul disagrees with John on whatever he thinks the reason is Jesus died.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. They're human, they're holy,
Mm.
and just like me.
Yeah.
And guess what? Then I can pull out something like a piece of fiction or a nonfiction book and be like, oh, that's what that person thinks about that. I
That's
just
right.
hold it like any other writing at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at too. I think that was a big like awakening for me was thinking about like myself, like my Facebook post from 10 years ago, make me cringe when that memory comes up. I'm always hesitant to click on that memory tab because I'm like, God, I only know what I said 10 years ago today. But
Right.
it's always, it's interesting to go back and look at that because it helped me think about like Paul,
Mm,
Paul's words have probably been weaponized against me, and I've been taught to weaponize them against others more than any other words in
mm,
the Bible. And I remember one day thinking to myself, well, let's say that maybe Paul really did mean things the way that I was taught that he meant them. Maybe Paul really did say things with the emphasis I was told that he said them. Maybe he really was the rule guy, whatever. Maybe he was. And if he was, what would he say now, all these hundreds of years later, if he were to
mm.
go back and look at those things? Would he cringe? What,
Right.
if his letters to the church's memories tab came up on his Facebook account, would he cringe
Right.
at the things that he said, like I do? And it just makes it feel much more human. And I think
Mm,
you have to say yes because we all change, we all grow, we
mhm,
all evolve. Even the staunchest conservative fundamentalist person in some way, shape, or form has grown and changed in whatever direction over the course of their lifetime. And I think that
mhm.
we have to expect that the same would be true of these biblical writers. And I think if we say that they wouldn't, I don't think we're being honest with ourselves. I think we're wanting the Bible to be something that maybe it's not meant to be. And we're putting a
Right.
weight on it it's not able to withstand and to carry. And I think that when we take that weight off of it and allow it to become even a little bit more of a human book, I
Mhm.
think it takes on a whole different element. I think it can take on a much different voice that it speaks into our lives.
Right. Well, I think even back to the beginning of what we talked about, instead of it being the external authority in my life, it's actually a book that I can engage with that maybe awakens, triggers, whatever word you want to use, something inside of me. And guess
Yeah.
what I can say now? You know what, Paul? You were wrong.
Right. Yes.
I differ from you on this.
Yeah.
The same way as I can say that about somebody I admire that I read. and I'm reading their book, and most of it I'm like, yeah. And then others I'm like, oh, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
This does not feel good in my soul.
Yep.
So for me, you're not okay.
Yep.
No, I don't actually agree with you about that. And the permission for me to say I don't agree with something in the Bible is very exciting.
Yeah. That's huge. I remember the first time I felt that too. I was like, man, I really don't think I agree with this. And that little voice inside was like, yeah, that's okay. You don't have to.
It's
I was like,
okay.
man,
Yes.
yeah. And
Yes. You
I'm
don't have
having that
to.
conversation with my daughter recently because she's 7. And
Hmm.
so she goes to a public school, but she hears things. Kids talk about things, whether it's politics or it's religion, things that they hear at home. And there was a couple months ago, she said she was with her friend who lives nearby, and they were outside or something, and her friend was talking about hell. And we've talked a little bit about this concept before. And she said, she said that, hell is a real place and the Bible says it's real. And if it's in the Bible, it's gotta be true, right? It's gotta be real, right? It's gotta be, it must exist. And again, I didn't think it did exist. And I don't, and she was like all upset about it. And I said, I said, well, she said, what do you think? I said, let me turn it around to you and ask you first, what do you think? She goes, what do
Hmm.
I think? I'm like, yeah. I said, well, what do you know about God? Like, well, God is loving and God is kind and
Hmm.
God is forgiving. And, she rattled off all these things. I said, okay. I said, what did this person tell you about hell? She's like, well, it's like it's fire and it's a place where people go to be punished. I'm like, does that really make sense that those two things go together? I was like, what do you think? She goes, I don't think so. I said, I don't think so either. She goes, well, what about in the Bible? So you studied the Bible, it's in there, right? I'm like, well, I said, there's different I said the Bible is written in different languages. I said, but there are things in there that kind of allude to this idea of hell and this place of punishment. I said, but you know what? I said, at the end of the day, I said, what I just said to you, I said, the Bible is this collection of all these writings where people are
Hmm.
trying to flesh out and figure out what does it look like? Who is this God that we're trying to follow? And I said, some people talked about hell, other people didn't. And I said, I think that it's left up to you and me to decide what we really think. And I said, I don't
Hmm.
really think that it doesn't make any sense to me. And so she goes, okay, I don't think it does either. But giving her this freedom to know that, like, you don't have to listen to these external voices. And again, to trust that intuition that you have inside, because I know deep down inside what she was thinking. And I wanted her to be able to access that voice, not feel like she had to shut it off because somebody else was telling her something. And I said, someday, as you grow, people are going to have all these different ideas about God. And they're all going to be telling you what to think. And they're all going to be trying to get you to think their way. I said, but at the end of the day, you've got to quiet that noise down and kind of listen to what you have inside
Hmm.
and see what you think, because that's what's most important. So whatever it is that you think, I will support you regardless of what it is. I said, but you got to
Yeah.
listen to that inner voice.
Yeah, that's so good. And just think about the cycle you're breaking with yourself and then how that's playing it out, where you're not power over her, but you're empowering her
That's
and
right.
to listen to her inner voice
Yeah.
to to not shut down her own internal authority. Yeah,
Hmm.
I could listen to that, but how does it make sense for me inside? What you know right now about God, how does that fit? And it's like very quickly a child could be like, yeah, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But it's so beautiful because they can then do that with every kind of
That's
quote
right.
unquote person in authority,
Yep.
even us,
Yep. That's
quote
right.
unquote, the parents, even you, Glenn. I think about that. My own kids, they're grown and flown, but my oldest always tended to look to me
Yep.
as her external authority because of the way I raised her when she was super little, and me always pushing back and watching us fight for her to have her voice. As something as simple as this morning, she has a newborn and she's like, I don't know what to do about the schedule, blah, 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 and she's not sleeping. And I found myself being like, well, maybe you could do this. This is what I did. Well, and then
Yep.
I just said, well, what do you think? The same words.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you think? What will work best for you in your life
Yep.
with this baby? And she said, well, I think this was so cool. Going, I think I'm going to let her tell me what
Mm.
she needs today.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's her now, me helping her to get her inner voice, and then her immediately saying, I'm going to have my child tell me when she should nap and when she should eat. I was
Yeah.
like, what is this? This is incredible.
Yeah.
But now her baby is probably going to grow up with like your daughter. continuing to listen, being allowed to
That's right.
listen to those even bodily functions and
That's right.
emotions. Oh, that's another lovely portal to the soul is our emotions, but I won't get onto that. But
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
all
Uh,
the things that are going on inside of us. Yeah.
yeah. And like you said, breaking those generational things because you raised your kids in a particular way when they were that age. And now you're talking to your daughter about doing things differently. And then she's taking what she's thinking and she's bringing it to her daughter. And now her daughter's super small and she's going to have all these things already at her disposal. Whereas you and I and your daughter had to get those things probably much later in
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
Yeah. So
Wow.
good.
Wow. Esther, we are just about out of time, but this has been so much fun. I really appreciate your time with us and your work, and it's so important in the world. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I loved coming on the
Thank
podcast. I
you.
love it. The thing I would just say too is I love what your podcast is called, that what if,
Mm,
because I think that if anybody's questioning whether or not they're listening to their own internal authority or somebody else's external, I think that's a very, very powerful question to always ask yourself
that's right.
is what if it's different
Yep.
than what I've been told all my life?
Man. Yeah.
What if I can get out my art supplies?
Yeah.
What if my dreams have something to tell me?
Yep.
What if?
Yep. What if? Just
And
just try it on, see what happens.
just try it on. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a very powerful, powerful question. So I love that.
Awesome.
I
Thank
love that.
you. Thank you. And
You're
real
welcome.
quick, where can people go to connect with you online? Any kind of website, social media
Yeah.
things, podcasts, whatever you want to talk about, give it to us.
Yeah. Just quickly, Esther Joy Getz is my website. There I have my very newly budding spiritual direction practice called Heard and Held. And there's like tabs across the top. If you're anybody's interested in my day job, that's called Moms of Pigs. But where I'm really moving is into my Esther the Dalai Mama. My kids gave me that name space where I do have 4 seasonal books around rewilding your soul. They're daily meditations. Some of them I'm like, "Ooh." And so they go on the seasons of the calendar: winter, December, January, February, March, April, May is spring, and they're just daily meditations of my holy and human journey. Some
Mhm.
of them you'll be like, okay, I don't agree with that. Others perhaps you'll connect with.
Yeah.
And I've had them out for about a year now, and they are constantly ever evolving and changing. I just kind of redid winter to
Mm.
add some things and take some stuff out that I don't even agree with myself about a year ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they're an ever evolving thing. I'm just going to kind of continue to work through, but you can get those on Amazon. They're called Wit, Wisdom, and Whimsy, and they're also on my website. But yeah,
Awesome. Well, I'll put the links in the show notes and we'll do this again.
thank you. I loved being with you, Glenn.
Thank you.